send this bill to the House.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. Call Andrew Little.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A pleasure to take a call on this second reading of the Health and Safety Pike River Implementation Bill, and to acknowledge, Mr. Speaker, that the issues underpinning this bill, while they have been, or at least this bill has been motivated and activated by the tragic and disastrous events of Pike River, actually the issues underpinning it predate that dreadful event. And I refer to a paper prepared by the Department of Labour in September 2008, in which they were analysing the problems with the current framework of health and safety, and one of the problems they identified was what they describe as, and I quote, a lack of procedural guidance on employee participation, which leaves underground mining potentially open to commercial pressures and day-to-day worksite management decisions, end quote. So, Mr. Speaker, it is right to look at this bill, having now been through the Select Committee, against the problem that was identified even 2 years before the Pike River tragedy. And, Mr. Speaker, while there are many aspects of this bill that we find favour with, and on that basis we will be supporting, there are nevertheless some concerns that we continue to have. It is good that the bill legislates for an independent, standalone health and safety agency. It is something that had been called for some time. That is in place in the form of WorkSafe New Zealand. The disappointing aspect of the bill at present is the governance of WorkSafe New Zealand, and even not just the governance but the advisory group, with the power to establish advisory groups in it. So the board of WorkSafe New Zealand, in putting that together, the relevant minister is required to, and I quote, have regard to the need to ensure, end quote, that the body has certain people amongst its membership. So there's no requirement to have any specific category of person or a person from relevant organisations. It is simply the minister having regard to the need. And then the particular classes of skill or competency described in Clause 7 of the bill include, after we talk about public sector governance and central government processes, we need people experienced in those, then goes on to say, describe people who have, and I quote, perspectives of workers. And another one is perspectives of employers. Well, we are so diluting now exactly what we're trying to get to here. This was modelled on the British Health and Safety Executive. And when that was established in 1974, it was absolutely clear. It was people who came out of employers' organisations, people who came out of unions and workers' organisations, and people who were there to represent the government. And that's what we should have. That was, in the 1974 British legislation, about setting up a genuinely tripartite process. This legislation in its current wording, or this bill in its current wording, does not do that, does not speak to tripartitism. It speaks to the old neoliberal public management theory that we've had for the last 30 years. And in my submission, Mr. Speaker, it is inadequate, and if it progresses in this current form, and indeed this is the basis on which WorkSafe New Zealand is established, it will be found to be inadequate. The bill goes on to say, under Clause 8, that WorkSafe New Zealand, or the governing board, can establish advisory groups, and they are described as providing a forum for dialogue between government employers and workers. And so that's the level of tripartitism. It is not about genuinely sharing decision-making, it's about providing a forum for dialogue. And so, Mr. Speaker, we think that the bill doesn't go far enough in providing a genuinely tripartite process and a shared decision-making process for workers and employers and workers through their unions. The next aspect that I want to draw attention to relates to the scope of the bill, and particularly in relation to the new workplace health and safety procedures. the establishment of what are now described as site health and safety representatives and also industry health and safety representatives. Now, and when it comes to site health and safety representatives, it is interesting that that part of it, indeed the entire bill, now excludes quarrying, which originally was included in the bill. Quarries are still unsafe places. They at least are hazardous places. There are plenty of hazards in quarries, no matter how big or small an employer a quarry owner might be. And I have to say, Mr. Speaker, we take no comfort from the representations of the member who just spoke on behalf of the Minister, who seems to draw a distinction between sort of the big employer and the small employer. When you're a worker, it doesn't matter the size of the workforce, it is the work that you do. It's the work that's hazardous or dangerous, not the size of your employer. So drawing these artificial distinctions, Mr. Speaker, is not helpful. And so, Mr. Speaker, we take no comfort from the fact that quarrying and indeed gold mining or alluvial mining is to be excluded from this legislation. It is encouraging to see that tunnelling is still included, at least so far as site health and safety representatives are included. And we should bear in mind, it's only a matter of a few weeks ago we saw the aftermath of probably one of the worst tunnelling accidents we've had in this country, where gas that had accumulated in a tunnel in an urban area ignited, blew up, it killed one person, it blew the legs off another, and endangered and injured many others. And so we should not see that tunnelling is any less safe than indeed underground coal mining. It is still capable of being unsafe because of the build-up of gases, whether they are natural or piped or whatever. The unfortunate thing is that although tunnelling is covered by the site health and safety representative provisions of this bill, the industry health and safety representative provisions do not include tunnelling. It is confined solely to underground coal mining. And there's no question, a piece of legislation animated and inspired by the tragic events of Pike River, of course it's going to cover underground coal mining. But the reality of Pike River, and as the Royal Commission pointed out, was at pains to point out in its report, is that although it was talking about an incident and an event and a tragedy that arose in the underground coal mining industry, many of its findings had a wider application. So it's disappointing that when it comes to a very innovative provision, although, or at least innovative for New Zealand, not innovative for other parts of the world, that it has been confined to that very small part of the industry, underground coal mining. Nevertheless, Mr. Speaker, it is good to see that where workers and the unions are of a mind to do so, they can appoint an industry health and safety representative that will have some real power and ability to make some real difference and do some real things. It is encouraging, if I could go back actually, to see that the site health and safety representatives will have some real power as well, some power to intervene and to stop work where necessary, subject to requirements of good faith, subject to the obligation to communicate clearly and effectively with the employer, but a site health and safety representative elected by workers will have the power to go directly to inspectors, go outside the business, and also directly to take steps to stop work where it is regarded as unsafe and unhealthy. And I think that is a welcome provision. It is going to be interesting to see how well supported that is, particularly by WorkSafe New Zealand and its staff, its inspectors. Because if there is one thing that is consistent in the flavour of many of the submissions by employers that went to the Select Committee, it is, oh, yes, we think we need to do a lot more about health and safety, but we don't want anybody having these sorts of powers. Employers, particularly those who don't have unions or union representatives on their workplaces, appear to be, in their submissions, concerned about this possibility. They shouldn't be concerned. And if anything, it's the workforces in those places who should feel encouraged and at least now a greater sense of safety, and with a greater sense of confidence they can go about their work, knowing that somebody working shoulder to shoulder with them who knows what's going on has the power now to make meaningful steps to ensure health and safety in the workplace. So, Mr. Speaker, we welcome those things. We will have some slight changes to make in the committee stages on this debate to improve, I think, these aspects. And to just one final point on the mines rescue provisions of the bill, it is disappointing to see that no provision has been made to confirm that the Mines Rescue Trust controls a future incident.
I call David Bennett.
Speaker, just want to follow on from the